Well, Trump was calmer than most people expected, and Hillary wants to spend more and more money. And by the way, we're all racist. I'm Dan Perkins.
Happiness is a new job for many Americans. I'm Don Mazzella.
It's time for Two Guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings.
Well, Don, tonight we have a special guest. We have a gentleman by the name of James Didio, who is a former deputy sheriff in Lee County near Fort Myers, Florida, and he wants to be the new head sheriff, and he wants to put more police on the street. I think it's important that we are in a unique position to have Jim on tonight because of what's been going on in Charlotte and what's been going on in the discussion about the police, even in the debate last night. So I know Jim has some pretty strong opinions. So, Jim, welcome to Two Guys from Verona.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here, and it's great to talk with you guys tonight.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
If he has strong opinions, he'll work well in this show.
That's true. That's true. No wimps and no political correctness allowed in this show. Jim, you were on the sheriff's department for 10 years in Lee County, and you left. And tell us why you left and why do you want to come back?
Well, I can tell you that after being a deputy for so many years, trying to start a family in Southwest Florida as a cop is really hard. We hadn't received a raise in almost 10 years, and we were still at the $35,000 level. We're actually one of the lowest paid agencies in the state of Florida, $8,100 less than the other agencies there. So, when I decided to leave, it was monumental for me because, I love my job as a cop. I like helping people. There's many aspects of this job that I just absolutely loved. But when it came down to not being able to afford to raise a family and to get by with life, I had to make a significant change, and I went into the private sector of business on my own.
And from there, and then at some point in time, after you were in the private sector, what made you decide to run for sheriff?
Well, very shortly after I became a private business owner and learning, obviously the ups and downs of owning a business, which has been outstanding. I still own a business today. But I learned very quickly that I miss law enforcement, and a local small municipality took me back as a part-time officer to patrol the waterways of Southwest Florida, beautiful Southwest Florida, and also help with training and exercises out on the island with my knowledge and experience. With that being said, I still obviously paralleled the Lee County Sheriff's Office and watched every move and saw the same thing going on. And I said, listen, I'm going to step aside here and I'm going to take a crack at politics.
And so you decided to run as the independent candidate because
right.
of the Republican incumbent. I believe his name is Scott.
Yeah.
What do you see, Jim, as the differences between you and Sheriff Scott?
Sheriff Scott has done, an outstanding job. He's a 30-year law enforcement officer here in Lee County. He's a 12-year sheriff, but he is actually nearing his retirement. His Florida retirement system expires in less than 24 months, and for some reason he's running again. With that being said, we have followed a lackadaisical political type atmosphere at the sheriff's office that has affected employees. 53% of our employees have left due to resignation. Our budget's out of whack, and there's a love-hate relationship with that gentleman. And I just want to take it back to law enforcement and keep people safe, and that's my main goal. Is to fulfill that need in the law enforcement community, especially in today's age.
You did so. I'm sorry. Just one more question, Don. Then you can jump in. Not that I have it orchestrated. It just was on my lips as I was getting ready to say something. You ran an unusual campaign in that, as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong, you went out and talked to people. You listened to what the electorate was saying, whether it was in the rich white neighborhoods or the poor
Right.
black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
What was there any commonality of what the concerns were, regardless of where it was in Lee County?
Well, I can tell you, to start off, being a non-party affiliated candidate, I'm able to reach out to everybody. The Democrats, Libertarians, the Independents, the Republican Party, and meet everybody, and that's been great. One common thing that everybody said, whether it was a national level or a local level, they were worried about their safety. It came from everything from Homeland Security all the way down to whether their car was going to get broken into at night. And those were major concerns of mine, especially, when you're talking about safety in a town that you grew up in a place that you're raising your family in. We do pretty well, but we're not in a gated community. So we have to look out for our own property, and I definitely want to keep up with safety and follow what they have a need for.
Okay, Don.
Well, I was going to ask him if you're going to expand the force, as you indicated, and raise the budget. How do you finance the county sheriff's office, and who's going to pay the bill?
Well, I can tell you, looking at these recent Charlotte riots and looking at other places around the nation, to see an agency which, has been called understaffed. It was an understaffed police force. The Lee County Sheriff's Office is understaffed by 110 already budgeted positions, okay? They're already paid for. The taxpayers have already been paying for them, and they've been paying for them for the last 3 budget years. This current sheriff is actually trying to raise the budget again another $20 million, and he keeps promising these new employees, but it's really, the hiring pool at $35,000 is very limited. We go through a vast number of applications and fly through them immediately. People can go to another agency with better qualifications and make double, triple the money right out of college. But we do have the money for 110 positions. It's going to take a sheriff to go out and actually recruit these guys from colleges, from high schools, anybody who's 18 and up, try to get them interested in law enforcement and interested in their community.
Jim, you said that, I think you said when we talked before the show, that there's about 1,700 employees in the sheriff's department in Lee County.
Yeah, we're budgeted for around 1,700. We're just under 1,600, really, depending on the day.
So the extra, what would you say, 110?
Yeah, about 110.
110 police officers are already budgeted, so there's no new tax revenue.
No.
The sheriff just hasn't. So let me ask you a question. How many officers out of that 1,700 or 1,600 employees are actually out patrolling as deputy sheriffs?
Well, our need is for somewhere around 400. And I can tell you that right now on the roads alone, between the districts and the shifts and the guys who actually hit the streets, we're looking at a number somewhere around and sometimes less than 200 at a given time. That's low. That's low for us. That's lower than when I was there. It's lower when I started. Lower than when I started.
So what's the risk? What's the risk of having such a low to the community? What's the risk of having such a low participation rate in the sheriff's department?
Well, I mean, it's an obvious thing, but something that's is safety. It's something that people don't really realize is that law enforcement, and my plan is to obviously enact a lot of community policing, and that means that you, Dan, living in Southwest Florida, you should know who patrols your street. Just like the old days when you knew that so-and-so was out there and even his son or his dad was a retired deputy and his son's going to be a deputy and so on. That's community policing. And when you have 200 deputies, when you're supposed to have 400 deputies or 350 or whatever the exact number is, you lose that. You lose the ability to reach out to the individual communities. All you're doing is answering calls, and you're doing a reactive patrol. You're reacting to crime. You're not very proactive at all, and that's a huge risk in law enforcement.
So if you were to be elected sheriff, what do you think is a good number to have on the streets patrolling?
Like I said, I firmly believe that between district deputies on the road, the guys that you see in your police cars, and then the detectives, we need somewhere around 420. And the way that I look at this budget, we can do it, and we don't even have to ask for any more money.
Well, I guess my question is, why hasn't the incumbent done this?
Well, I can tell you that like I said, the hiring pool is tough, and in recent years, being such a political guy, as I said before, not a bad guy, but highly political, he's done a lot of promotions. We have a number of administrative deputies who carry a gun and a badge that are getting paid sometimes triple what it would cost to have a new deputy on the road. So that's 3 deputies in one guy, and this one guy, he's an administrator. And you know how administrators are, 30 years in, they're public service guys, as we use quotation marks, and they don't really do a whole lot. They're the guys who are, they're doing safety classes here and there, and that's about it 5 days a week. We need guys on the street. And that's very important, and he's not doing that.
Your number, if I can do the math right, is if there's 1,600 or so people in the sheriff's department, 200 on the road, 200
right.
225. Are you saying there's almost 1,400 bureaucrats?
Well, we do run our jails, and we have a little bit of the equal amount of jail deputies, administrators over there, and we also run our court systems. So if you think about that and you take a look at the deputy to civilian ratio, we do have less law enforcement than we do civilians. We have a lot more civilians, and in actuality, the recent step plan was given to the civilian personnel, in which they know where they're going to be in a couple of years via raises. In fact, they've received more raises than certified law enforcement officers. And I look at this thing 10 times from Sunday, and I can't figure out how or why this is happening.
So let's go to Charlotte.
Okay.
As a person very working part-time, interested in becoming sheriff, and what have you seen that might have implications for Lee County, and what would you do as sheriff to make it safe?
Well, you look at a place like Charlotte, and obviously we're watching the news media, right? And it looks like it's mayhem down there. It's looking crazy. And when in actuality it was 4 square blocks. Now, my wife went to Appalachian State University, and we've spent many good times up in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I've been through those streets, and we have close family and friends that live there. But bringing it back to Lee County, I kept thinking as I watched all these riots throughout the past couple of years, I was trained in field force, crowd control, and riot management. I was on a specialized team for a number of years, and, we were actually considered unnecessary by our current sheriff, and he refused to pay us for any, time spent in official training, and it really baffled me. So a lot of people had dropped out of that. So it's clear that we must prepare and be ready in the event that this takes place in our county. We're going to have, as a sheriff, I'm going to have an implemented, creative, and highly trained plan with a foolproof outcome if this ever happens in our community. We need to maintain law and order while investigations are being conducted. I mean, that's just the downright of it, because these guys are acting, these rioters seem to act hours after the gunshots go off. And that's limiting our ability to actually take a look at this thing and find out what's going on. People are already coming to conclusions.
You're absolutely right. I was in Boston this weekend, and I was talking to a Boston police captain about this and that, and he said the blacks get the first shot now. Police fear.
Yeah.
Would you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I mean, I think about that because in training and coming up, that had been said, and it's not the first time that I've heard that. And we think of who takes the first shot as something in the military, such as rules of engagement. Well, in law enforcement, we define our rules of engagement as a use of force continuum. And listen, we're trained to go home at night. We face every type of evil out on these streets. And when a person doesn't follow basic commands, he won't show his hand, or even he pulls a weapon. We call this an increased force response. Does every situation mean that someone gets shot? No. But let me bring it home for the listeners here. I've been a cop for 10 years, and I've pulled my gun, but I've never shot anyone, and I don't want to shoot anybody. I absolutely, unequivocally want to go home at the end of my shift with my 2 young children and my beautiful wife. I do this to save lives and to create a better world. As it does, every other cop wearing the badge thinks this same thing. I respect your life just as much as my own. But I'll tell you what, if a guy's going to pull a gun on me, I hope I can get the gun out quicker. And that's just the way that like I said, I just want to go home at the end of the night.
So we've got about 30 seconds, Jim.
Great.
Why do you think the people of Lee County should hire Jim?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm running for sheriff to make our homes safe for all people in Lee County. I want to represent everybody in Lee County and make sure, because it is my job, it is what I'm trained to do, is to keep you safe during the day and at night. And that's my whole main goal here.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us, and good luck to you in your November race, and maybe we'll talk to you again.
Hey, Dan, Don, thank you guys, and have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
This is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
We're the Two Guys from Verona. Go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com, and we'll be right back after these messages from our sponsor.